It's a big week this week for the Denver Broncos as they're set to host joint training camp practices with the Los Angeles Rams. What are we hoping to gain out of these practices as the final preseason game approaches? Well, you're going to get that and much more on this morning's brand new edition, Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of GMB as we break down what is to be expected this week here for the Denver Broncos as they prepare for their final preseason game against the Los Angeles Rams. In anticipation for the buildup to that, they'll have joint training camp practices this week in which we'll be able to attend every single day. We'll provide coverage of that here. You get that exclusively on GMB. But as you're watching this channel, if you're not yet subscribed here, hit that subscribe button on the Mile High Sports YouTube page so you get your daily Denver Broncos conversation. But we have other Colorado sports that we talk about as well. Drew Creasman covers the Colorado Rockies. Arif Dean covers the Colorado Avalanche. And Ryan Blackburn covers the Denver Nuggets. Plus, we have some content from Swipa Cam and others you can get here exclusively Mile High Sports. If you are a Colorado sports fan, I'm Cody Roark. I'm a Broncos beat reporter here from Mile High Sports. And really setting the table for this week, I think the real conversation we have to have really kind of pertains to what is the buildup here for the third and final week of the NFL preseason. What should we expect here from this Broncos football team? Will we expect to see Russell Wilson and the starters in Saturday's home preseason matchup at Empire Field at Mile High, where Broncos fans for the first time will get to see the new stadium renovations, over $100 million invested into the game day experience, the overall venue experience there for fans, a new bourbon club that you can see in there that the Broncos have. You're going to see new signage for retired jersey numbers. You're going to see new signage for the Broncos Super Bowl accolades, and obviously a brand spanking new massive scoreboard, video board that fans will have a broadened experience with come the regular season. And they're going to get a little bit of a preview on that in Saturday's game against the LA Rams here. Now, with practice, the whole theme this week, Denver's going to practice this morning. This is just a regular practice at the Centura Health Training Center here between the Broncos. Tomorrow's practice, what we will see, the LA Rams. Thursday's practice, the LA Rams. And then the Broncos kind enough to host a media barbecue for us following practice Thursday. Looking forward to that. Friday, they'll do a walkthrough that we do not get access to. And then Saturday, hey, it's preseason action. It's going to be an evening game, I think 6:30 Mountain Time once again. I'll be there at the stadium covering the game here for MHS. But for the Broncos in this situation here this week, you're going to have these joint practices and you're going to face a new look LA Rams team in practice. And I think this will be good for us as well. I'm very curious to see what the structure of these practices will look like with Sean Payton, Sean McVay. These two guys have a really great relationship with one another. And obviously Sean McVay's a terrific coach. But I wonder how this changes the dynamic of our coverage this week. You know, like for the Broncos, for example, they'll go through, they'll do their little walkthrough, then they have team stretch, then they'll go through and they'll have a little bit of a period where it's individual emphasis, or after that, they'll go into what we call the competitive periods, right? Where we're going to see some of the 9-on-7. It's mainly a run emphasis between the O-line versus D-line, linebackers, safeties. Then you have your one-on-ones going on the other side of the field. Part of me is wondering if that format will still stay the same here. If you attended practice, you know exactly what I mean. But I think it would be a good look to have the Broncos offensive line and their run group that they have there in the 9-on-7 period against the Rams defense. You need that. Now, must preface this by saying there will be no Aaron Donald this week, more than likely at joint practices, as he and his wife are expecting the birth of their child. So he is going to be excused. He's not going to play in Saturday's game, even if he was here for the trip. I don't think he was going to play in the game regardless. But then again, the NFL preseason is kind of setting the table for the regular season in terms of, hey, you want to have as much game rep, game speed as possible before your first game so you can jump right into it. But it's a little bit of a different conversation we'll have a little bit later on. But I think it's a good test for the Broncos offense. Not only that, the Broncos defense, when you flip it, vice versa. You have the Rams offense running the ball against the Broncos defense. And then, of course, the competitive periods, the one-on-ones, Denver's DBs versus the skill players and receivers for the LA Rams. Cooper Kupp is expected to be back in the mix here at practice this week after dealing with a hamstring injury for the first part of training camp here. Not sure if he's going to be limited, not sure if he's going to be active in some of those drills, but the expectation is that he's going to be getting a little bit of a ramp up in practice this week. So we could see that. be fun to see Patrick Surtain versus Cooper Kupp in this situation here. But then you flip it around, vice versa. Cortland Sutton, the Broncos offense, Jerry Jeudy, those guys working against some of the Rams DBs now. A little bit of a difference this year. No Jalen Ramsey at the cornerback spot after they traded him to the Miami Dolphins this offseason. So they have a relatively young roster nucleus, really outside of Aaron Donald. They're young all across the board defensively. You still have Matthew Stafford, who's a very veteran, experienced quarterback, Super Bowl winning quarterback. Cam Akers as well. He was involved in a little bit of a training camp scuffle a little bit. To me, I found it interesting. This is going to be the LA Rams' second joint training camp practice. They did one with the Raiders last week. They're doing one with the Broncos this week. So a little bit of a interesting ploy there. It's not bad because you actually get to go against another look versus your own team. And I'd say for Denver, the first 3 weeks of training camp, they're going against their own guys. Being able to go and compete against somebody else you're going to compete against on Saturday that isn't your teammate, that gives you a little bit more incentive. But with that, I must say we have seen some things that have occurred in these joint practices where there's some fisticuffs, some hands thrown, words exchanged, and you never want to see things escalate to a point of some of the things that we have seen so far throughout the rest of the NFL and some of these joint practices. But you know what? It's chippy. You're going against people that they're not your teammates, so you don't have any love for them. It's competitive. You're trying to win a roster spot. You're trying to win your job, and you got somebody else in front of you. Of course, I think tensions are going to be high, but I would like to, I think me personally, I would like to see both teams come out of it this week without getting into any skirmishes. But then again, it's a highly emotional game, highly physical. We'll see how things kind of play out there for the Broncos and the Rams here. Some other things I think maybe to expect here in the lead up is we're going to see some familiar faces as well. Former Broncos quarterback Brett Rippon is, I think, anticipated to be the backup behind Matthew Stafford this upcoming season. And it'd be good to see him. Always been a big fan of Brett Rippon. Anytime I've chatted with him throughout the course of his time in Denver, he's been nothing but gracious to me. And obviously, I'm very happy for him to get an opportunity where he's a little bit closer to home. And I think he's going to have an opportunity to play for the Rams this year. I really do. He's a cerebral guy. I think he does things that Sean McVay will maximize. So it'll be nice to see Brett Rippon come back to town here for the Rams inside of the Broncos. Looking forward to being able to hopefully get a chat with him a little bit before he has to head in there. But Broncos country, our conversation is going to continue. What are some things we'd like to see improved on this week as the Broncos will get tested by the Rams in practice? We're going to talk about pass protection. We're going to talk about some other guys to stand out, and you're going to get that on today's GMB. But first, let me tell you about our friends over there at Superbook Sports. You hear that? That's the sound of football coming back, and now is the time to place your preseason bets with Superbook Sports. Superbook is the most trusted name in Vegas, and now you can use promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 with their first bet bonus. Win or lose, they will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MILEHIGH. Don't miss out on this football season. Win some money with Superbook Sports and the promo code Mile High. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. As we continue this morning's Good Morning Broncos country, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch us and support us here at Mile High Sports. We got some really exciting news coming up with our cover. Our new MHS magazine is going to be dropping soon. There's a Broncos player on the cover. Who is it? And you'll have a chance maybe to win some copies of the magazine. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel down below here. But let's get into the conversation about maybe some things we want to see this week. If the Broncos starters aren't going to play in the third and final preseason game against the Rams here, in practice, you want to see the offensive line protection, more importantly, becoming a little bit more consistent. I felt like for the most part against the San Francisco 49ers in week 2 of the preseason, I felt like the Broncos offensive line did much better. Now, I will say Garrett Bowles looked much more improved in this game than he did against the Cardinals 2 weeks ago. Ben Powers has struggled for 2 consistent weeks in a row, and we addressed this in yesterday's episode of GMB. You paid a lot of money for this guy to come in and be a real solidified anchor on that offensive line because the offensive line last year was bad, but so far, Ben Powers has struggled with consistency in his pass protection in the sample size that we've seen. There was one play Russell Wilson was able to maneuver out of a potential sack, deliver a 12-yard throw to Javonte Williams, but when Russ came out of the game, Jarrett Stidham came in. Ben Powers surrendered a sack to T.Y. McGill, and it allowed Jarrett Stidham to go down, and it backed the Broncos up, impacted them on that drive. I don't know what it is because, to me, just watching Ben Powers in training camp, he's been pretty good up until the last 2 weeks, where it seems like he's struggling with his foot placement or he's reaching for defenders. I don't know if it's a miscommunication thing that's going on. Sean Payton has alluded to some of the issues Denver has had on the offensive line from a protection standpoint as really just being leverage based. So, how is he getting out leveraged? How does he, as a player, adjust that? Because when he was playing with the Baltimore Ravens, he was really good in pass protection, he was really good in run blocking. I don't know if it's a new scheme transition. I'm not sure what it is, but so far, I would say Broncos fans are probably more concerned about Ben Powers than they are anything else on the offense or even Russell Wilson. And look, if you're concerned about Russell Wilson, after what we've seen through 2 weeks of the preseason, what we've seen so far in training camp, I don't know what to tell you because some folks just want to be miserable. Russ has looked good. Russ has looked fine. There hasn't been anything in Russ's game that has concerned me. I've been watching him every day, dating back to OTAs at practice, and he's made drastic strides here in Sean Payton's offense. I think it's going to be a great fit for these two guys. There's obviously some things these guys are going to have to work on all throughout the season, some things in maybe a mechanical standpoint or just an operation standpoint. There's times where the Broncos offense is going to struggle, where Russ may struggle. But I think the moment we see him struggle, we're going to see the same narrative as last year from fans and from outsiders, national media. Oh, he's struggling. It's just not going to work. Football players are allowed to struggle. It's a 17-game regular season. There's going to be times where they don't look great. There's been games, and I just want to make this comparison here because I think it's important. Every year, you remember when Tom Brady was still with the Patriots? There was always one game a year that Tom Brady and the Patriots offense would struggle. And all of a sudden, it was like, all right, this is it. Tom Brady's done. He's washed. This is it for the New England Patriots. He just can't do it anymore. We've even seen some of these things come up with Patrick Mahomes where, hey, Mahomes doesn't have the greatest game. They're like, all right, hey, teams have started to figure out Patrick Mahomes. You know how hard it is to sustain really great quarterback play for 17 weeks? There's going to be times where Russ struggles, the offense struggles, but you want to see an overall body of work where there's more good than there is bad. And I think that anytime there's something bad, it gets magnified here. I like what we've seen from Russ. He looks faster. If you've watched the tape, he looks more mobile than he did last year. And I can tell you this firsthand. He was bigger last year so that he can maybe sustain some more hits, stand in the pocket. It looks like Sean Payton and Russ have truly gotten back to, hey, let's do the things that made you who you were through the first 10 seasons of your career, 11 seasons in the NFL. What got you there? Let's go back to that. And obviously, there's a plan for Russell Wilson. He wants to play a certain amount of years, and maybe some of these changes, he's like, hey, I can't take that much contact anymore because as I get older, the hits are going to be a little bit more amplified. Russ does not look any bit in part of how he did last year. And I think that's a great sign here. So you want to see him to continue to stack days. You want to see consistency now with this offensive line. You want to see Ben Powers get some more solidarity this week against a different defensive look than he's seen all throughout training camp. That'll be a good sign for us to say, okay, hey, is he making these necessary changes in terms of his technique? That's something that offensive line coach Zach Strief is going to continue to hammer home. And Sean Payton is not going to allow things to be bad. That's not in his DNA. I've seen enough of Sean Payton coaching since he's come into Denver. And you talk to people in New Orleans from the time he was there, and they've covered him. If there is something that's bad or that's something that's just making everything else suffer in terms of the overall product of the operation on offense or defense, Sean Payton's just not going to let it sit and be bad. He's going to invoke change, right? And he's going to light a fire under Ben Powers. And if that doesn't work, then he's going to find a different solution. But that's the hard part about this because the Broncos need Ben Powers to turn things around because they paid him a lot of money to be able to do that. Now, maybe some things to look forward to this week. Will we see the return of Mike McGlinchey as he continues to deal with the knee sprain? He's been working on the side field, has been out there every day, just hasn't done anything just because of the fact of his injury. So I don't know if we'll see him out there this week. If he's able to, that's great. Will we see Brandon Johnson? Obviously, with the injury to Jalen Virgil and the torn meniscus that he's going to have surgery on, you need some other receivers behind Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. They're going to have to step up here. And look, we're going to see a lot more Greg Dulcich, Adam Troutman, hopefully some more Albert Okwuegbun when I'm getting involved in the passing game. But coming out of week 2 of the NFL preseason, I was thoroughly disappointed in the production from the Broncos wide receivers behind those guys. Jalen Virgil had the biggest play from scrimmage overall with a 50-yard catch, and he led the team in receiving. And that was one catch right before halftime. Didn't get to see much from Marquez Callaway. Only had one target in the game against San Francisco. Little Jordan Humphrey had a couple of targets. He caught one good pass there, a thread of the needle by Jarrett Stidham, but then he had a fumble. Luckily, he was able to recover. You're just not seeing anything. Kendall Hinton had some good blocks, but you didn't see anything in the passing game there. This is, I think, where the biggest question mark comes in, especially with the injury to Tim Patrick. Does this open the door for KJ Hamler to return here for the Broncos at some point? This now means an opportunity for Marvin Mims to continue to get more time with the first-team offense and Russell Wilson get that chemistry down pat, because Denver is going to need help at the wide receiver position. They're going to need the key guys for depth. But what we saw in the preseason game, week number 2, those guys behind Mims, Sutton, Judy, we didn't see any contributions from them in a big-time manner the way that I think the Broncos need in this situation, which is why I always go back to what Sean Payton has said. He wants to look at every other team around the NFL right now. He said it. Everyone's competing. You're competing with 31 other rosters right now. And I think that he's going to be monitoring roster cuts very, very tightly here. And now it's also another opportunity for the Broncos to maybe take a look at some Rams players up close and in person, some guys that may not make their active roster that get waived initially in hopes of being brought back on the practice squad. Denver has a chance to go out there and snag things. So I think that's something to keep an eye on here. If you are a Broncos fan, is who are some players from the Rams that maybe stand out? I'll provide you with as much coverage and detail as I can this week. I'm not sure exactly what the media policy is going to be here for the Broncos with LA Rams reporters and media coming to town. Is going to be restricted where, hey, no tweeting until after practice, or I'm going to be able to open things up. Regardless, I got my handy dandy little notebook right here. I'll take as much detailed notes as possible. We'll bring it back here on tomorrow's episode of GMB. Just want to say thank you so much, Broncos country, for rocking with us. I got to jet off to Dove Valley for the Broncos practice here this morning. It's a team practice. Then tomorrow, we'll open things up a little bit, having some joint practices with the Rams. You get all the coverage and the recap here on Mile High Sports on Good Morning Broncos. Just want to say thank you so much to our friends over there at Superbook Sports for sponsoring today's episode of the show. Broncos country, we'll see you tomorrow.